Welcome to the Boomer Briefing Podcast, where we help you solve a critical business issue in 20 minutes or less. I'm your host, Jon Hubbard, shareholder and consultant here at Boomer Consulting. And with me today is Amanda Wilkie. Hi, Amanda. Thank you for being on this episode of the podcast.
Thank you, John. Glad to be here.
Amanda is one of our technology and process consultants and, works with firms in strategy, right? And there's lots of ways technology and process play into that. But we have a topic today that is all about building great partnerships, great referral partnerships, whether that's with clients, whether that's with non-clients, people that are tangentially related to the firm. So Amanda, I want to ask you a big question. Why is it firms really think about their partnership strategy, and why is having strong partnerships so essential?
Yeah. Well, John, I think it is very important to the long-term success of any business today. Really, we saw a shift in 2020 where we were spending less time networking with people, shaking hands. We were spending less time at conferences or group events. So the way that we are building relationships has to become more intentional and has to become more strategic. So I think that is one of the many reasons that we're really starting to see a shift. But when we think about partnerships in general, or referral programs in general, I think it's very important because I know personally, and most people out there, it's statistically proven, we actually put more credit into a referral than we do just looking up something online. And I mean, yes, there are a lot of resources out there. You can look at reviews and you can look at comments and you can check out ratings and things like that. But nothing really sticks with us like a personal referral and someone recommending someone that they've worked with in the past.
Yeah, that's so true. And I like how you connected this topic with maybe over the last couple years, with everything everyone's been through. I think you highlight the fact that the strong partnerships that firms maybe had in place really shine through during the last couple years. So it is kind of highlighted like, wow, these partnerships that we've invested in really helped get us through the last couple years, and maybe these more transactional relationships that we had maybe fell to the wayside. Are you seeing that being true?
Absolutely. And I love the way that you put that, John. So the difference between, like a partnership and just a transactional relationship, because let's face it, CPAs are in the business of relationships. As we're starting to see, a shift, not starting, this has been going on for a long time, but we have seen that shift from transactional compliance work to more of the advisory and consulting. And that really is more of a deeper connected relationship. That's more of a partnership with your client than it is a transactional relationship like we used to see.
Yep. So what are ways you're seeing firms kind of focus more on developing partnerships, kind of having that mentality instead of just those transactional relationships?
Yeah. John, over the last, maybe 6 to 8 months, we have talked to so many firms that are really focused on client filtering. So they're really focused on identifying and cultivating what their ideal client is. And that's really where it starts. If you don't know what your ideal client looks like, then you're not going to be able to target them very well. You're not going to be able to communicate that to any of your referral partners if it hasn't actually been defined. So step one is actually identify what your ideal client looks like.
Yeah, and we've seen more firms finally, and I say finally because we've been talking about this for a while, finally commit to identifying their target client, no longer being afraid, because part of the thinking was, well, if we define our target client, what does it mean for non-target clients? Well, in most cases, firms are feeling the capacity squeeze right now, and they're saying, we don't need more clients, we need more of the right clients. And I think that's what you're highlighting.
Exactly. Exactly, John.
Okay. So what are some other key ways where, if you
Yeah.
consider maybe defining the target client as a foundational strategy, hey, get that set first. And then what's next? What are some other tactics?
Well, once you know your ideal client, you've got to figure out where they're hanging out. So again, things have changed a lot the last couple of years. So it may not mean that you're going to a conference. It may be a virtual community. It may be a peer community. But once you understand your ideal client, you'll be able to identify some of those referral channels that you're going to want to build partnerships in. So once you've defined the ideal client, look for where they're hanging out, because that's where you're going to want to hang out, because you've got limited time and limited resources these days. So you want to focus it where your ideal client is going to actually be. Once you've identified those referral channels, if you will, then you have to figure out what that partnership is really going to look like. So is it a referral partnership? Are we putting it on paper and documenting what that looks like so that expectations can be managed, not only managed, but they can be defined and managed on both sides. So once you have your ideal client, you have those referral channels, figure out what the partnerships look like and actually make them official. So that's a bit of the foundation. Next up, John, is really education. So educating your referral partners on the value that you actually bring. And some of these referral partners could actually be, current clients or in other verticals or whatnot. But if your referral partners can't actually properly communicate the value that you can provide, then they're not going to be able to educate their connections and their people on it as well. So you got to make sure that you have them educated. So you have your foundation, you have your education, and then of course you need a process for handing off those referrals. What does that look like? It's got to be more than just sending, an email with a name and another email address and saying, hey, here's a person you should talk to. You need to define what that handoff looks like. You need to establish consistent, easy ways to exchange partnership referrals as well. So you've got to have your education, your process, and then it really comes down to communication, making sure that you stay in touch, communicate regularly with those partners, making sure that it is a two-way street as well. And then, of course, following up. So following up with the referral, following up with your partners, your referral partners. Once you get the foundation, the education, and the communication in, and the process in place, then it's about continuous communication and follow-up, both with the referral and with the partner.
That was great, Amanda. And you cover a lot there, but I just want to highlight a few key things you're really touching on. One is all of this, everything you kind of walked us through ties back to the target client, understanding the target client. Without that, your kind of partnership strategy is built on sand, so to speak, because there's not a strong, kind of area of focus. And then, of course, the channels you choose to pursue those partnerships is influenced by who you're actually targeting. And so that was one of the second things you highlighted. When you talked about education, educating the channels, the individuals in the channels to kind of lead to finding those target clients. You were talking about you need to educate them. And one example, just in a recent conversation with a client, was around, we were talking about referrals and I said, yeah, we, ask for referrals, but we're not getting a lot. right now? Well, let's uncover how you're asking. And what they found was they were asking in a too of a general way. They had these kind of partners that they wanted to grow the relationship with, but they were asking, hey, please refer business our way if you come across anyone. Instead, they found that if they educated them a little bit more, saying, hey, we're actually looking to get more nonprofit clients that are between 5 million and 30 million of revenue that don't have a CFO right now, right? That type of conversation. Now you're educating them, focusing in that effort really helps people kind of know how to provide you some
Yeah.
referrals.
And John, to that point on education, many firms fail to actually educate people within the firm. So if the firm is looking to increase its advisory services, or let's say it's SOC for cyber services, well, if other people in the firm, if your partners in tax or your partners in audit don't understand what those services are and don't understand the ideal client for those services, they're not going to be able to refer even within the firm. So I think that education needs to really be focused internally as well as with some of those external partners.
So true. That's a really excellent point. And then you kind of hit on process. And what I wrote down in my notes here as you were talking is kind of a process that supports proactive outreach and not just reactive, right? So sometimes we can take the approach of, well, referrals, we can't really influence when they come. It's just whenever they happen to come. However, we do think that you can influence and move those conversations forward in a more proactive approach. And some guidance we've given clients over the years is, not only when you proactively outreach to a potential, partner saying, hey, do you have any other clients that are similar to you or meet these criteria? Also ask, hey, how can I send more clients or more individuals your way? So make it a mutually beneficial interaction every single time.
That's
And
what
it
makes
becomes
it
a lot
a
easier.
partnership.
Exactly. There it is. So tying back to a partnership. Exactly. And so often firms aren't thinking about it that way. And so they freeze up and they don't actually proactively ask for referrals because they feel like it might be intrusive or, that there's something not so attractive about doing that. But really your point, Amanda, is this is a partnership. So as we kind of round out our conversation here, Amanda, what are some next steps you would recommend our listeners take around this topic?
Yeah. Well, John, this has been a great conversation. Of course, I'm going to give credit to our colleague, Ariana Campbell. She wrote a great article that was recently published in the Boomer Bulletin on this topic specifically, on building strong partnerships. So I'm sure you will link the article in the episode show notes. So I would highly recommend taking a look at that article. And then, I always like to recommend having a conversation with us, John. You and I are always happy, and I'm not going to sign anyone else up who's not here, but most of our consultants are always happy to have a conversation as well. So I would say reach out, always happy to talk about some of these ideas and maybe hear what the pain points from firms.
Excellent. All right, Amanda. Well, as always, it's a pleasure speaking with you, and thank you for being on this episode of the podcast.
Thank you, John.
And for our listeners, if you enjoyed this conversation, we release new episodes every Tuesday morning. We always change up the topics to be in different categories, but one common theme is they can be critical to your firm's success. So please go ahead and subscribe, and thank you for listening.